But if I don't know, heavens opened up, and God, gave me a Swedish passport and said like, there you can go. I'm not really sure I would actually, I wouldn't do it without hesitation. Let's say so, because it's been a long time. I do like Sweden. I have friends there. I have lots of memories connected to that country, but I'm not so sure if I don't know.
Welcome to the Post Definitions podcast. I'm your host, Freddie Lancia, and here we have...
I'm Anton.
Welcome, Anton.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So today we're talking a bit about national identity, traveling, and relationships. And Anton has a lot of interesting stuff to say, so I'm really excited to dig into this and learn more about a friend and share a new person with the world and to my other friends in other places. So yeah, let's dig into it. So I'll just start off by saying that Anton is from Russia and lives now in Turkey, and also had been living in Sweden, and is a man with many relationships and a lot to say on that. So let's just start off by asking, maybe if you, say a little bit about your journey from Russia to Sweden to Turkey, and just like the logistics behind it, so we have some background.
Yeah, I mean, journey is a good word. It's more like spontaneous kind of movement, jumping from one place to another, really. But when I was 18, I realized that I don't really want to live in Russia. So I had this idea in my mind for a very, very long time, and eventually I became very interested in Nordic countries, specifically in Sweden. So I tried my best to go there. First, I went there as a tourist. It was the first proper trip abroad in my life. The first time I went abroad, with my friend, not with my parents. We had a very good time. The weather was wonderful. Met wonderful people. So I just immediately fell in love with the city, with the country, and wanted to stay there. And so I would go to Sweden over and over again for certain periods of time. Like I'd go there for a month, 2 weeks, 2 months to study Swedish, to make friends, to try to find a job eventually. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. Last time I went there, I did a volunteering project in a small town in the south of Sweden called Emmaboda. It's a very, very small place. It's basically a village. But it was the longest period I spent in Sweden uninterruptedly. About 9 months, I think. Yeah, it was.
Are you from a village in Russia?
No, I'm actually from a relatively big city. It's like in the top 10 biggest cities of Russia, but it's not famous for anything. It's in the south. It's called Rostov. The only associations that some people might have, maybe Sholokov, and who was a Nobel Prize winner for literature, Russian writer, wrote about that place. Yeah.
Cool. And do you feel more at home in a city or a village?
I definitely feel more at home in the city. Living in Istanbul right now, it's such a huge place. I find it very difficult to imagine myself moving somewhere to a small place. Really, yeah. I'm a city guy.
Cool. Maybe we'll come back to that. Or definitely we'll come back to that concept of home. But maybe do you want to continue explaining your journey?
Yeah. So when I was doing my volunteering project in Sweden, I really, really tried to find a job there, and I came very close to it. There was one offer from a school. They needed a teacher as a substitute teacher, for just 6 months. So not a big thing really in English. And I went for the interview. It went really well, and I had some good references because it's a small place, everybody knows each other. So, I had some good references. Like, oh, if that person refers you, it's a guarantee. Unfortunately, all of that, it was shattered, against the iceberg of Swedish bureaucracy because they had no idea how to deal with residence permits and stuff. And that was the main issue for me because I needed a residence permit to stay in Sweden, and unfortunately they didn't know how to do it. I was, too stupid to take matters into my own hands because I really assumed that, well, it should be their responsibility. Well, it wasn't.
Understand. Yeah, that's kind of a huge benefit of working for big companies. But also, I never had any interest in working for big companies, and startups also that I tried to work for also had no idea how to go about it.
It's like that. I mean, now I realize that, if you are a foreigner, having had this experience of living in different countries, I understand that, if you go somewhere, you want to live there, you should take the initiative. You should tell your employer, your boss, okay, you do it like this. This is the form you need to fill. This is the thing you need to do. But back there, I was naive, I guess.
Yeah. How old were you?
I'm 36 right now, and it was 8 years ago when I was in Sweden.
Okay, cool. That makes me feel better about myself because I also didn't take matters into my own hands. But yeah, we all need to learn it now. Maybe I just learned something.
Exactly.
Cool. And so, how did you end up coming to Turkey?
Well, so when I was in Sweden, at the end of my period, at the end of my time there, I studied a Swedish course, and then I met my ex-boyfriend, who was actually from Czech Republic. He was gonna go to London to work there for 6 months, and he said, "Why don't you come with me?" And because the visa regulations, I couldn't stay in Sweden because Sweden is within the Schengen area, but the UK is different. So I thought, why not? So I did, and when I was in London, I took a course for language teachers. It's a very, very standard, well-known course that, most English teachers would take, if they want to do it. It's called, most people know CELTA. It's not exactly that, but it's very, very similar. And after that, everybody generally looks for jobs abroad because that's what people do. And so I was also looking for jobs. I was still hoping to find one in Sweden, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But I also sent my CV to as far as Ecuador, really, because I was interested. Why
Did
not?
you send it to Ecuador?
I did.
Nice.
Yeah. I even researched a little bit because I had no idea about that country. I just knew nothing about it.
Cool. I also was trying to figure out how to search the whole world for jobs because I thought anywhere could be interesting, and if you broaden your horizons, you must find something. But kind of like what you said about how if you're in a small town, if you just have the right references, you can get a job.
Yeah.
Sometimes searching the whole world is kind of, even though you're broadening your horizon, kind of counter helpful because you don't know anyone in those places, and therefore, just because you widen your options, maybe you don't get it because nobody knows you and you don't have those kind of advantages.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if it's a small country, and Sweden is a small country, it's more difficult. You really need, I'm not saying it's not friendly to outsiders, but it's better if you know people. It's better if you have some connections, if you've been networking and so on. Yeah.
And how is it as a Russian in Sweden?
Well, I didn't really have any problems with that, but mostly due to the fact that I, look like a typical Swede. People see, a tall blonde guy on the street. They think and nobody ever spoke English to me in Sweden. Even before I learned Swedish. Because they automatically assumed I was local. So I didn't really have many problems with that. It was okay, and it was a long time ago. It was before the war and everything. So maybe the general public's opinion about Russians was still a little bit better than right now, I guess.
Probably better, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever start to feel Swedish?
I think I deluded myself into thinking that I felt Swedish, because I really wanted to shed off my Russian identity. I really wanted to become Swedish. I thought, this is great. Everybody already takes me for a Swede. And I did learn the language. I mean, I can speak it fairly well. And I like the culture and everything. But yeah, I think it was more of a delusion rather than a real feeling.
Yeah, why did you want to shed your Russian identity?
Well, that's a complicated question. I don't think I've ever really felt belonging in Russia for many, many reasons. And yeah, I was young, I was naive. I genuinely thought that you could, you can ignore your background, you can ignore where you come from, your roots, and just shape yourself into anything you want.
Where did you find the limits? Like, what couldn't you shed?
Wow, that's one of the things I noticed. There was one time when it was me and my Russian friend and a Swedish friend of ours. We were walking down the street at night after drinking at the bar and something. Everybody was having fun, everybody was drunk, etc. So there was this one guy on the street who was obviously completely wasted. Tried to start talking to us. He wasn't really threatening or anything. He just wanted to talk. And so I noticed that me and my Russian friend, what we did automatically was just, slouch a bit, take this slightly, defensive body position, say something like, no, ignore him and move on. Whereas our Swedish friend just stopped there, smiled, and started talking to him. And I realized, like, why are we doing this? Why, what's the purpose? The guy was completely harmless. He was just drunk and wanted to have some fun. But still, I couldn't shed off this, Russian mistrust for strangers. This feeling of, there is threat, there is danger coming from every corner at you.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And now, are you closer? Yeah, I mean,
I'm improving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm improving, but with lots of socializing that I've had recently, in recent years in Turkey, I'm improving. Yeah.
Do Turkish people trust strangers?
I would say that general level of public trust in Turkey is much higher than in Russia. You can see that by how people react when, let's say somebody is not feeling well, or if there is a fight, or if there's something that's happening. People generally will try to interfere, they'll try to help you, and I never had the feeling of, even as a foreigner, as somebody who does not, like an obvious foreigner, somebody who does not look like a typical Turk, I never had the feeling of being, mistrusted. And I'm learning myself, to trust people.
Oh, do you think that people are like more worthy of that trust here, or it's just like are people nicer to strangers, or like more honest, or?
Well, I don't think we can talk about people being worthy of trust, right?
Well,
it's just
yeah, I mean, there could be, like, for instance, let's say like there's a country with a lot of crime, then it kind of makes sense that the general population is not as worthy of trust, right?
Well,
through experience, through people's experiences.
Right, it could be. I could say that for Russia, maybe, but then again, it's very difficult for me to judge my own country because, I grew up there. So I have, a very specific outlook, very specific perspective on that. But yeah, in general, I feel good about people in Turkey. I think that they are, if we're talking about that, yes, they are worth being trusted. Except taxi drivers, of course.
Of course.
But even that, people say, if you see any typical tourist, like article of, giving some tips on traveling in Turkey, they will all say, do not trust taxi drivers. Why? I haven't had such a bad experience with them. They're okay. Some of them will definitely try to cheat you, but hey, isn't that the same thing everywhere?
I feel like I trust the minibus drivers.
Well, I mean, you trust them with your life, considering speeds at which they go.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
How do you think your perspective on Turkish life and Turkish culture differs from that of a Turkish person? Like, because you were talking about how, like, you can't speak for your country, Russia, because you're from there. And, like, what would you say about Turkey with, like, confidence that a Turkish person would not say?
Well, interestingly enough, I think many people from Western countries, and right now I'm including Russia in this broad category. Many people from Western countries would say, oh, this country is so chaotic. There is no order. There are no rules, which is understandable because you go to any small shop and you'll never see, for example, the opening hours, on their doors. Like there's just no such information. Oh, when do you open? It's about this time. When do you close? Whenever they feel like it. But this unpredictability, this kind of chaos is what I see, in Turkey. But it's I notice things, as a Russian, I notice things that Turks generally do not notice. Like, you can ask questions. For example, we were in the cinema, the other day, and they do give a break in the middle of the film, but, it doesn't say anywhere how long the break's going to be. It's going to be 5 minutes, 15 minutes or something. And when I asked my Turkish friends that question, they're like, oh, we never thought about that. So they never really considered looking at it from this perspective. When you ask a question, okay, but there must be some kind of regulations, for example, on the level of noise that is acceptable. And they're like, oh, really? We never thought about that. So that might be the difference.
Yeah, it's almost like there's not that kind of order here, and therefore there's not a lack of order. Like, no time, like, time doesn't work in terms of numbers.
But at the same time, it seems to me that they're more willing to accept, maybe, I don't know, they're more willing to accept when things, are wrong, broken, do not work, and so on. They are less likely to question, why is this thing not working? Why is this, office closed right now? And, being Russian, like, stirring the pot a little bit can be helpful, actually, because it did help me in some situations where my Turkish friends just said, like, oh no, oh, it's closed, oh, well, there's nothing we can do right now. And I went further and tried to figure out, and I did find a way, and I tried to talk to people. It's like, no, wait a minute, so I made things work where my Turkish friends just simply, gave up because they just accept, this kind of thing.
Very surprising. Yeah, interesting. I think that Americans would also accept things. Like, if a place is closed, it's closed. There's no exceptions, nothing you can do about that, right? But actually, I thought that Turkey would be also like, okay, maybe we can try to fix something because there's wiggle room. Like, okay, no one's here at the shop, but maybe they could open it if we could find them, or right? But
in a way,
does it work like that in Russia?
No, I don't think so. But Russians, because of the Soviet legacy, we are generally mistrustful to all kinds of systems, and we generally, question, lots of things. So this is a very typical Russian behavior. If you go to, let's say you need to go to a bank, for example, right, and you need to get some kind of certificate or some kind of paper, and they tell you, oh no, we don't give those kinds of papers. So what the typical Russian person would do, they would start questioning why. Like, and if they insist, like, okay, please show me, the policy of the bank that states specifically, like, you can actually go to that level. It's pretty normal in Russia to ask, to talk to the manager, ask to see, like, some kind of printed rules, policies, and so on. Whereas in Turkey, nobody would ever think about that. When we talk about rules, Russians do expect that, every rule must be written somewhere. You might not have it at hand, but it must be written, clearly stated somewhere. Turks do not have that assumption. It's a lot about, I don't know.
Yeah, really interesting. Let's go back to this concept of of home, and what it's like to search for a home in the world.
Well, that's a very good question. Yeah. I mean, I do feel like I found my home right now. I feel at home in Istanbul. It's a place that, I've spent the last 5 years of my life in, and so, yeah. I can't say that I'm looking for a new home right now. But for me, it has to do a lot with, you have to connect to the place you live in. You have to really like it. You have to love it. You have to have some feelings. Let's say, I'm not a Turkish citizen, for example, and I can't vote. But every time there's an election in this country, I do have very strong feelings for it, because I really, really feel that I want this country to change for the better. I cannot personally affect it in any way, but, I do, sympathize. And when, something happens like this huge earthquake that happened last year, it is, absolutely heartbreaking. So I cannot just, isolate myself from that and say, oh, I'm just a foreigner living here, I don't care. No. So it was like that in Sweden. It's like that in Turkey. I think that's the main point. You have to love the place where you live.
Is there anything you can do or try to do since you can't vote?
Well, I mean, not really. You can try to convince your friends, I guess, to vote for certain candidate or a party, but that would be absurd,
So do you think if you could have stayed in Sweden, you would still be there?
That's a very good question. I mean, yeah, if I'd stayed in Sweden, back when I was there, I'm pretty sure I'd still be living there right now. But if we're talking about, going there right now, for example, which is very unlikely, maybe not possible actually, because of residence permits, visas, etc. But, if, I don't know, heavens opened up, and God, gave me a Swedish passport and said, like, there, you can go, I'm not really sure I would actually, I wouldn't do it without hesitation, let's say so. Because it's been a long time. I do like Sweden. I have friends there. I have lots of memories connected to that country, but I'm not so sure if, I don't know, yeah. It's a tough one, yeah. But I would have stayed if, if I had got that job, or if I got that residence permit.
And do you think theoretically you would have been happier there, or the way that things went and that you ended up in Turkey was a positive thing?
Well, I don't know, because I was quite happy in Sweden. I really enjoyed my time there, except for maybe one thing. I never had any romantic success when I was in Sweden. So, I mean, I did date a lot of guys, but I never really met anyone who was looking for any kind of serious relationship. And I did fall in love there as well, but, never mutual feeling.
You think that was just your luck, or do you think that, like, that says something about you or the countries, or?
Well, I tend to think that, it's just because the country or the city felt jealous. It's just because, it wanted to have me for itself, not
Probably.
share me with anybody else. Because I keep on saying, that I was in love with Sweden. I was in love with Stockholm, so maybe that's why.
And what about Turkey? Turkey's in an open relationship with you. Istanbul. Istanbul will share you with.
I mean, yeah.
Your boyfriend.
See, Istanbul feels different. I do keep on saying things like it's my city. It's in many ways my country, but at the same time, it feels very different because there are so many people living here. Like the notion of ownership and jealousy and possession is really different here. I don't know.
So, okay, tell us more about that, because like right now it's like a really abstract, like funny metaphor between like your love for Sweden, and now it seems like you are also in a relationship with Istanbul, but it's an open relationship because there's so many people in the city. And what does that actually mean? What's yeah.
I think that, Sweden and Turkey appeal to different sides of my personality, because when I'm in Sweden, I think, that my, orderly side, the one that wants to have, order, clarity, the one that wants to have everything, planned and settled, it flourishes there, really, because it's a very good place for that, to plan, to live a healthier lifestyle, to be more, I don't know, focused, I don't know, goal oriented. When I'm in Turkey, the other side of my personality, the one that is, a little bit self-indulgent, lazy, but also very open, very friendly, very outgoing, and so on, flourishes here. So in many ways it's more like, some kind of, it's a hedonist country, really, and so I feel that, the notion of monogamous relationship doesn't really go together with this, self-indulgence and hedonism. So
that's really interesting. Yeah, lately I've been thinking a bit about this concept of, a lot of people think that we are where we've been, like we are, like you grew up in Russia, you are largely Russian, then you are a little bit Swedish because you spent some time in Sweden, and then you are a little bit Turkish because you've lived in Turkey. But actually I'm noticing more that, like, you are where you are in the moment. Like, I'm so much something as soon as I step into Istanbul, and so much another thing when I'm in Sweden. And that's basically what you're describing. Do you think that, like, if you went back to Sweden now, you would sort of revert to what you were in Sweden before, or now you'd be this, I mean, of course you'd be a little bit different, but like, would you bring all of Turkey with you, or?
I wouldn't revert, that's for sure.
Okay.
And I can see it when I meet my Swedish friends. I can see that, I do not talk to them the same way. I do not act the same way as I was in Sweden. Because I absolutely agree with you. I was a different person back then. Now I'm a different person. So if I were to go back to Sweden, I'd definitely bring a lot of Turkey with me. Not in the least, I can be hasty, impatient. I can talk very fast, a lot, and these are all very non-Swedish qualities, but they are perfectly fine in Turkey. I definitely bring that with me.
Very interesting. We were just in a discussion yesterday, like a group of people gathered to talk about something, and it was a battle for who could speak next. Mm-hmm. Hasty, impatient, as you're describing. Mm-hmm. There was like half of the people were Turkish, and we just were somewhere in Germany doing something similar. And in Germany, it was very slow. Everyone took their time. If you wanted to say something, it was very easy to get in and say something, even though there were even more people in the conversation.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
That's how I feel. If you're in the group and there's a Swedish person around, you feel like you're always interrupting them. Because that little pause that you have after you've finished speaking and it's my time to talk, that pause is much longer in Sweden, for example, or maybe in Germany, maybe in Nordic countries, than it is, in Turkey or Russia, for that matter.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I like it in Germany and Denmark. Like, I'm at a slower pace, I think. Yeah. Well,
lifestyle here is very different, and I do really like it. I enjoy it. It suits me well, but at the same time, like I said, it might be, it might not play to the best parts of my nature, but it is what it is.
What did it feel like when you at times didn't feel like you had a home, like when you were still searching?
Well, when I first came here, I'm in Turkey, it was a project. So I was really thinking like, okay, I'm going to try that. I have no idea how this is going to turn out. So if anything, I can always go back to Russia. My parents will be delighted, to have me back. So, I didn't feel like this place was home from the very beginning. It was more like an experiment. Then eventually, I met my boyfriend, was one thing. But another thing was, I rented my own flat which is a big thing for me, because sharing your space with somebody else and living in your own space, they are very, very different things. So that contributes to the feeling of home for me. Getting to know people, getting to know the environment, when you know local people who work at small shops around you, that all is very, very important to the feeling of home.
And having a romantic relationship.
Absolutely, yeah.
What is your relationship with having a romantic relationship? Like, I think you told me that you have almost always been in a romantic relationship for the past few years.
Yeah, I'm that kind of person who is always looking for a partner. So even when I was much, much younger, in my group of friends back in Russia, everybody was perpetually single, and it was always me who would Anton is with another guy again, but I did spend last 10 years of my life in monogamous relationships, not in one, several, but still. And whenever I was single, I immediately started looking for a partner. So I had always the feeling of this, there is this gap I need to fill, I need to feel secure and safe on that side. So yeah.
And now you're in an open relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
And in the past, when you were in monogamous relationships, did you desire that? Did you want to be in other relationships?
No, I did want that, but that being said, people change, and my perspective of that changes. I mean, I used to want a monogamous relationship, but now I'm a different person. So
how did that change?
Well, I don't know, age, experience. I mean, also, the situation here is that, my boyfriend is far away. He's abroad in another country. So we are not physically together in the same place, which is, it's easy to have an open relationship in a situation like this. You don't even see each other. But also, I started questioning, whether monogamy is actually something worth pursuing for me, for myself. Thinking about that, because I used to think that yes, the answer was yes, absolutely. But I also used to believe in a lot of things which I'm questioning right now, such as, this absolute perfect equality in a relationship. Is it ever attainable? And, do we have to have that? Can you have a perfectly functional relationship without being equal in every aspect,
And you think that an open relationship is something that obviously comes with inequality? Is that why you mentioned that, or?
No, actually, no, that's another story. But yeah, I mean, what do we mean when we talk about an open relationship? Generally, people understand that, you are still committed to each other, and you can have, then after that, this thing varies. It could be that you can have sex with anyone you want outside of that relationship. But, in some couples, for example, sex is okay, but, there's no kissing. Or sex and kissing is okay, but no romantic dates, just hookups. And, it really, really varies from couple to couple, from person to person. Not even a couple. I mean, it could be more than two people in a relationship as well. So, yeah. I kind of got lost in thoughts.
There's so much.
Your question was
I don't know.
Okay.
There's so much to ask, but maybe we'll maybe just bring it back to identity, and maybe we'll dive back into that again, with just what it's like to be gay in these countries in your life.
Well, people have asked me that question a lot. Especially it's oh, you're living in Turkey, you moved to Turkey. This is not the most obvious choice for a Russian person, right? Because I think most people in Russian LGBT community would probably, happily, see themselves in, some wonderful Western country where everybody loves gays, and everything is perfect, hunky-dory and so on, But Turkey is definitely not a country that comes to mind. And people ask me that, what's it like? And I say it's 1,000,000 times better than it was in Russia. I haven't faced any kind of, random hatred, bullying, abuse or anything, not even a bit of what I did in Russia. But that being said, I'm a different person right now. I'm older, I'm more experienced, and also, I do understand very well that, being a white male foreigner is a very it's a very good position in Turkey. So I'm sure that if I wasn't white, for example, or if I was female, my experience could have been very, very different. So yeah, I feel much better here, and it really depends on what you mean like by Turkey, because I do realize that I'm living in a bubble. We talk about Istanbul, namely Kadıköy, this, the most liberal, and I insist that it's the most gay-friendly neighborhood of Istanbul. Yeah, life is pretty good here, but it's not the same in other cities, other parts of the country, not even in other neighborhoods of Istanbul. So.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so you mentioned equality in a relationship. What does that look like, and is that it's becoming less important, or you think it's less achievable? What do you think about that?
I started questioning that because I used to believe that it was absolutely essential to a relationship to be, equal. But, I started questioning whether it's actually possible. I'm not sure, based on my experience, I'm not entirely sure that we can ever talk about the equality of feelings. For example, I do have a feeling that in a relationship, one partner inevitably loves the other a bit more than, or a bit less. And that may change as well with time, that, depending on how long the relationship is. And also, it kind of, there is this perfect picture of, always making decisions together, always considering, each other and each other's good, when it comes to relationship. But I'm not sure how that, for example, how does that align with, what we talk about when we talk about sex, when we talk about kinks? Because, generally, people may not want, do not want equality in that relationship, So like, let's say, for example, I have a friend and she told me that, she says, like I'm a very typical feminist when it comes to social life, but when it comes to sex, I actually prefer, to submit to my partner completely. And that bothered her for a while. She also was trying to find the answer to the question, how is it possible to have those two things at the same time? And I'm also thinking about that. If, we say that sex is an integral part of relationship, then how do those two things, how do they agree? How do they go together? I'm not so sure. BDSM relationship is in no way is not meant to be based on equality, but it is a perfectly valid, functional relationship as well. So,
Yeah, interesting. And so you used to struggle with the idea of inequality in a relationship, and now you feel differently.
Well, the second longest relationship of my life was with a guy who was, realistically speaking, not equal to me in any way. He was from a small town, he lived in my hometown in Russia. He financially, socially, he didn't really have any friends when he went there. He didn't really have that much money, so like on every level, we were not equal, and yet, that relationship worked very well. I did love him, and I know that he loved me. So, like, I think every aspect, starting from sex, and up to, like I said, social or financial security, we were not equal in any way, but, it still worked for almost 4 years.
And that was part of your journey to, like, understanding that equality was maybe not so
I think
necessary,
so.
not so important.
Yeah, but it's more about understanding myself and what I want from the world, from relationships, how I see myself. I'm not trying to preach here. I'm just trying to discover myself.
Yeah. So in the past, when you were single, you searched for a relationship, and now you're in an open relationship, and now you search more for hookups or for something less than a relationship. So for the first time, you are searching for something less than a relationship. And how does that feel?
I think, yeah, something less than a relationship sounds very good. It's a very good way to put it. Hookups have actually never been my thing, because, you know, I'm just that kind of person. I get attached to people easily, and I always want, something more lasting. So it's a very, very interesting question. One of the things for me was, when I started my open relationship, one of the things I really, really craved was not sexual liberation. It was, going on romantic dates and, just having this, the thrill of, seeing somebody flirting, like, I don't know if he likes me, like, etc., all the, awkward and shy touches, kisses, and so on. That was the thing that I really, really wanted, because, and I think it's not a secret to anyone, of course, if you spend several years with the same partner, it's very difficult to keep up the romance, right? Some people try to do that. Some people try to organize, dates, like, sort of like pretend that they just met each other. Yeah, that was my craving. And now I'm not so sure, because I think I've satisfied that thirst for some time, and I'm still looking for the answer.